Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're not a Roman general drawing up grand battle plans. You're not even a Roman. You're one of the unlucky, unwashed thousands dragged halfway across the known world by a man with a grudge and too many elephants. You are a Carthaginian foot soldier, and your job, if it can be called that, is to follow Hannibal over the Alps, on foot, in the snow, in autumn, with no idea how far it is, how cold it will get, or how many of you will die before you reach the other side. Spoiler, it's most of you. So before you lace up your mouldy sandals and start vomiting from altitude sickness, leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what ungodly hour your brain decided to pick this particular flavour of historical suffering. And if you'd like early access to more tales of trench rot, frostbite, and other stories best told lying down, plus other perks like ad-free audio of these episodes, there's a link to the Patreon below. But for now, lie back, breathe slowly. Pretend that's not a dying elephant you hear. Let's begin. You didn't sign up for glory. You signed up because you were hungry and someone promised you coin. Or maybe they didn't even bother with that. Maybe you were just standing in the wrong village when the recruiters came through, counting bodies like sacks of grain. You were conscripted, branded, handed a spear that's older than you are, and told you were part of something historic. That was the lie they led with, that you'd be remembered. But the truth is you're meat. You're a walking logistics problem. And now you're walking to Italy. Not just Italy though. Number, that would be too easy. You're marching from Iberia, that's modern day Spain, not that you know or care, all the way through Gaul and across the Alps. Mountains, real ones, cold, jagged, vertical death with snow on top. The sort of place goats look at and say, not today. And you? You're doing it in sandals, with no map, no supplies, and elephants. Don't forget the elephants. Because Hannibal, your general, your genius, your beloved madman, thinks nothing says surprise invasion like dragging a dozen terrified megafauna up a cliff face. You've never even seen an elephant before this campaign. Now you sleep beside one, eat near one, and march directly behind one. Their dung steams in the morning frost, and their eyes look just as confused as yours. The trainers swear the beasts are war-hardened and loyal. You watched one scream for 10 minutes because a bird landed on its trunk. This fills you with confidence. Your unit is one of many. Tens of thousands of you slogging forward, mile after mile. The sun is cruel, the nights are colder than they should be, and your rations are something between flour and sawdust. You chew it until it turns into paste, swallow, and hope it doesn't come back up. Spoiler, sometimes it does. The officers keep telling you that soon you'll cross the Rhone, that the real campaign will begin, that the Roman heartland is within reach. But you can't see that far. You can barely see past the next hill. The land you march through doesn't want you. The towns resist. The tribes ambush. Even the weather seems personally offended by your presence. You cross rivers that reek of dead things. You camp on soil that sucks the warmth out of your bones, like it's collecting a debt. The animals are skittish. The veterans are quiet. The new recruits still joke, but not as often and not as loud. You wake sore, walk sore, sleep sore. Your back aches from carrying too much, and your feet are starting to blister through the thin leather of your sandals. There's a smell in your boots you can't identify, and probably shouldn't. No one talks about it, but everyone has it. You've started to recognize people by their limp. At night, when the fires burn low and the wind howls across the plain, you try to sleep. You really do. But your stomach growls loud enough to scare rats, and your body twitches like it's trying to escape the march without your permission. You hear others muttering in their sleep. Prayers mostly. Some cry. The officers pretend not to notice. Morale, they say, is a delicate thing. Best not to interfere. Occasionally, a messenger gallops through the column with a scroll or a barked order. You never hear what it says. Strategy happens miles ahead, in tents filled with maps you'll never see. Your job is simple. Move forward, don't die, carry what you're told. When battle comes, and you know it will, your job will be even simpler. Hold the line until you can't. Somewhere ahead, Hannibal is smiling. You've seen him once from a distance. He looked confident, clean, and completely insane. The sort of man who'd try to solve a land war with elephants and sheer audacity. His officers adore him. His enemies fear him. You? You're still not sure he knows your name or your existence. You are one small vertebra in a very long, very doomed spine. Every few days, the column stops for a count. Casualties are noted. Names are scratched off lists. New recruits are absorbed. No one dwells on the lost. There are too many. There's too much still ahead. You learn not to ask where people went. If they're lucky, they deserted. If they're unlucky, they froze, fell, or were left behind in a ditch. You carry on, always forward, always into worse. Rumours trickle through the ranks like spoiled wine, that there's no way through the Alps, that half the pack animals won't survive the climb, that Rome has already fortified the other side, that the gods themselves have cursed the mountains. You don't know what's true. You're not even sure it matters. Your feet hurt, your breath fogs in the morning, your teeth ache from grinding in your sleep. These are the truths you live with now. And the Alps, still ahead, distant white teeth gnashing at the horizon. You try not to look. You try to pretend the road goes somewhere else. It doesn't. You'll be climbing soon. You and the elephants and the dying mules and the men who haven't realised yet that they're not making it down the other side. So here you are, nameless, freezing, expendable. Welcome to Hannibal's army. Welcome to history. It's going to be a long, hard, miserable march, and by the time it's over, you'll envy the ones who never started. If you're looking for the part of the story where things get better, you've taken a wrong turn somewhere around birth. Spain is not the paradise the recruiters promised. It's not even the version of Spain the traders talk about. The one with olive trees, soft hills, and wine that doesn't taste like vinegar mixed with regret. Number the Spain you get is a splintered wasteland of rebellion, betrayal, and constant warfare. Every town is a trap. Every road is a grave. Every day is the same question, asked over and over by the bodies you step over. Why are you still here? Hannibal's campaign in Hispania isn't just a military movement, it's a purge. Rome has allies here, and allies mean villages full of terrified peasants who get to choose between being taxed by the Romans or burned by Carthaginians. Most don't get to choose. You march through town after town where the welcome signs are written in blood, and the silence means the screaming stopped just before you arrived. You're told you're liberating them. You stop believing that around the time you see your first mass grave. Siege warfare is worse than marching. At least when you march, there's the illusion of progress. In a siege, you sit in a circle around a city full of people who hate you, waiting for them to run out of food. Meanwhile, you're also out of food. You eat rats, then the rats run out. Then you chew on your own teeth, just to feel like you're doing something. The commanders try to keep spirits up with speeches. You learn to tune them out after the third guy starts vomiting halfway through his inspirational story about dying with honour. The worst part isn't the hunger or the cold or even the disease that seems to spread every time someone exhales too loudly. It's the attrition, not just of people, but of belief. Your unit started with 200 men. You're down to maybe 150, depending on whether you count the ones with open wounds, and no will to live. The losses don't happen all at once. They trickle in. A spear through the gut during a skirmish, a poisoned well, an infected blister that swells until the leg is amputated, and then that doesn't help. There are 1,000 ways to die here, and each one is dumber than the last. You try not to remember names. It's easier that way. You stopped forming friendships after the second guy you bonded with took an arrow to the throat while relieving himself in a ditch. He died choking on his own blood and waste and you just stood there, stunned, because what were you supposed to do? Scream? Pray? There's no God here worth talking to. Just mud and vultures, and the sound of wet boots squelching through what used to be a person. Ambushes are the worst. They come in the early morning, when the fog is still thick, and the world feels like it's been wrapped in cotton soaked in dread. You'll be dozing with your cloak pulled over your head when the screaming starts. It always starts with screaming. The Gauls and Celtiberians hit fast, blades flashing, horses pounding, fire where there shouldn't be fire. Your first instinct is to run. Your second is to freeze. If you're lucky, your officer shouts something vaguely useful before his arm is taken off. If not, you follow whoever's still standing and hope they look like they know where the front line is. Sometimes you win. At least, that's what the commanders say. But standing knee-deep in corpses while your comrades shovel limbs into a pit doesn't feel like victory. It feels like cleaning up after the gods threw a tantrum. You stop asking how many died. It doesn't matter. It never changes what's next. March again? Bleed again? Wait for the next town to show up on the horizon like another bad decision you haven't made yet. Hannibal, for his part, seems to thrive in all this. You hear the stories passed around like bad bread, that he sleeps in the dirt with the men, eats the same garbage rations, and fights at the front when needed. You don't know if that's true. You've never seen him up close. He might as well be a ghost with good PR, but people believe in him. And when belief is the only thing keeping your legs moving, sometimes that's enough. The worst battle is the one you weren't expecting. A village with no walls and no visible army. You're ordered in to pacify the resistance. Turns out the resistance is hiding in the fields, with sharpened sticks and better aim than you thought possible. You lose 17 men before you even raise your shield. By the time the fighting ends, the crops are burning, and the bodies are stacked in the irrigation channels. You leave with ash in your teeth and the knowledge that there's nothing left to win here, only more things to lose. When the order finally comes to move east, toward the mountains, you feel something close to relief. Not hope, not really, but a numb sort of acceptance. You've survived Spain, or more accurately, you've endured it. Your reward is a new flavour of misery, one with snow, and wolves, and altitude. The veterans laugh when the Alps are mentioned, not because they find it funny, but because they've forgotten how not to laugh when something hurts, so you keep walking. Not because you want to, not because you believe in the cause, but because stopping means freezing in place and becoming one more body for the next wave of idiots to trip over. Spain is behind you now, a place of ghosts and rot and lessons no one seems to learn. The path forward is narrow, steep, and unforgiving. And you'll take it, because there's nothing else. You don't remember exactly when you first saw the Pyrenees, only that it felt like a joke no one was brave enough to laugh at. They weren't hills, they weren't even mountains in the way you'd imagined. Tall and noble and snow-dusted, like something from a myth. They were teeth, jagged and mean, shrouded in fog, rising out of the earth like the gods had given up on making terrain walkable and decided to punish geography itself. You stared at them slack-jawed while the officers told you this was the easy part. They lied. The Pyrenees are not a warm-up. They're not training ground for what's coming next. They're a slaughterhouse with good views. The paths aren't roads. They're goat trails, if the goat was drunk and suicidal. Slopes so steep your toenails go black from the pressure. Rocks that shift just enough underfoot to send the man behind you, hurtling, into oblivion. You want to walk slowly, carefully, but there's a line of bodies behind you, all panicking, all pushing forward because no one wants to be the one at the rear when the ambush hits. And ambushes do hit. The local tribes have no love for Carthaginians or Romans or any empire that claims land they don't actually live on. They wait above you, hidden in the mist, slinging rocks, javelins, and the occasional angry livestock. You hear screaming before you know you're under attack. You raise your shield out of reflex, which helps until someone drops a boulder the size of a man's ego into your formation. You see your friend's skull split like a pomegranate. You keep moving. The trees offer no cover. The slopes are too steep to form a proper line. Discipline shatters in seconds. One group flees upward, another tumbles down, and you're caught in the middle, swiping blindly at shapes in the fog, and trying not to die somewhere that smells like damp moss and spilled intestines. Eventually, someone blows a horn, or enough of you scream loud enough to make the tribesmen bored, and they disappear as suddenly as they arrived. The dead are left where they fell. You've learned not to expect a proper burial. Afterward, your commander claims it was a victory. You're not sure what was won. You lost 30 men in one afternoon. The trail is soaked in blood and vomit. Your shoulder's been dislocated since mid-morning, and the medic says to walk it off. You look around at your unit and realise half of them are gone, dead, deserted, or missing under the fog. No one bothers to count anymore. The numbers are bad and getting worse. Sleeping in the Pyrenees is its own punishment. The ground is sharp. The wind screams through the passes like it's searching for someone in particular. You build a fire if you can find dry wood, which you can't. You eat whatever's left in your rations, which isn't much. One man tries to boil snow. Another tries to catch a bird with his bare hands. Both fail. The bird escapes. The man who ate the snow gets dysentery. You step over him the next morning because there's no room on the trail for weakness. And stopping means freezing. The elephants are not enjoying this any more than you are. They slide. They slip. They trumpet with such despair that it makes the back of your skull vibrate. One falls during a steep descent. The sound it makes when it hits the ground is not something you'll ever forget. Like a mountain sighing, like a god giving up. It doesn't die immediately. That takes a while. You're ordered to keep walking. Morale, if it existed before, is now compost. The men around you mutter openly about turning back, about stealing a horse and deserting, about surrendering to the Romans, who, for all their faults, at least build roads. Someone jokes that maybe a Roman jail isn't so bad if it comes with a roof. No one laughs. You all consider it more seriously than you should. Your feet are shredded, the skin's gone in places, blisters on top of blisters, now just raw meat pressed into leather and mud. You tear a strip from your cloak to wrap your ankle, then another from your tunic, until you're barely dressed but slightly less bloody. The cold doesn't care. It licks at your fingers, turning the tips numb, then black. You rub them together like that's going to fix anything. It doesn't. You pass a trail of corpses on the fourth day, some yours, some not. Men who fell, froze, or gave up, and simply laid down on the rocks until the night took them. The officers tell you not to look. You do anyway. You recognise one. You don't know his name, but you remember the way he sang off-key during camp nights. His lips are blue now. His eyes are open. You don't close them. Somehow you make it through. You don't remember how. Time blurs. Hunger dulls. Pain becomes background noise. And then, as suddenly as it started, the slope begins to ease. The path widens. Trees reappear. The air thickens slightly, like it's trying to remember how to be breathable. You stumble out of the mountain pass like something dragged from a grave and realise this wasn't the hard part. This was just the beginning. Behind you, the Pyrenees stand silent, not conquered, not overcome, just endured. Ahead of you lies Gaul, the Rhone and the Alps. The moment you enter Gaul, you know you've made a mistake. Not a tactical one. That's for Hannibal to worry about, assuming he worries at all. This is a personal mistake, an existential one. Because Gaul is not a place built for armies, it's a place that seems to have been designed specifically to grind men into the mud, one footstep at a time. You thought Spain was bad. Spain at least had roads. Gaul has rivers. Rivers and bogs and a landscape that changes its mind every hour. You've traded jagged cliffs for wet oblivion. Endless marshes stretch out in all directions, soaking into your clothes, your supplies, your bones. The mud sucks at your sandals like it's hungry, and in some places it is. You've seen men disappear to the waist before anyone could pull them free. The engineers call it soft ground. You call it a grave in progress. Everything here feels waterlogged. The trees, the sky, even the air, as though the entire country is exhaling swamp gas straight into your lungs. It doesn't help that the locals are only half interested in murdering you. Not out of mercy, out of boredom. Gaul is a patchwork of tribes who hate each other just slightly more than they hate you. Some throw rocks from a distance, others watch from the trees. A few send envoys with nervous smiles and sharp knives hidden behind their backs. You never know which kind you're dealing with until it's too late. And by then, someone's already bleeding in the river. The Rhone is the real problem. Not because it's especially wide or deep, though it is both, but because Hannibal wants to cross it without dying. A bold request. The Roman allied tribes are hovering nearby like vultures waiting for a limp. You're on one side, Italy is on the other. Between you, hundreds of meters of fast, freezing water and absolutely no bridge. That's where the brilliant plan begins. First come the rafts, not real rafts. These are bundles of logs tied together by men who've never tied anything that had to float before. You load them with supplies, horses, and occasionally other men. Sometimes the ropes hold, sometimes they don't. 1 minute you're drifting calmly across the river. The next, you're upside down in a whirlpool, your spear floating past like a farewell letter from common sense. Then come the elephants. Yes, elephants. You're still dragging those poor beasts with you because Hannibal refuses to give up the world's most terrifying mascot. But elephants don't swim. Not really. They thrash, they panic, they sink. So someone comes up with the idea of floating them on pontoons, massive, creaking, half-submerged platforms that look like oversized fruit baskets and behave about as well. You watch in awe and horror as the first elephant is coaxed aboard, tied down, and pushed into the current. It goes about as well as you'd expect. The beast screams, thrashes, breaks its bindings, and nearly takes half the crew with it. One man disappears under the water and doesn't come back up. Another clings to the elephant's tail until both vanish into the fog. You assume they're dead. Days later, you'll find out they weren't. Just very lost, very cold, and very done with elephants. Eventually, you manage to get most of the army across. Not without losses, not without screaming. You carry water in your boots and cold in your joints. The sun doesn't warm you anymore. The wind comes off the water with the force of a slap. But you're across. The engineers cheer. You don't. You've stopped wasting energy on optimism. The Romans are close now. You can feel them. You don't see them yet, but their presence is like smoke on the wind, distant but unmistakable. Officers speak in low tones about scouting parties and cavalry patrols. You sharpen your weapons, not because you expect to survive, but because it's something to do with your hands, while you wait for another order that might kill you. The Gauls help a little. One tribe even offers safe passage through their territory. You don't trust them, and they don't trust you, but no one wants to be the first to start something they can't finish. They feed you root stew that tastes like boiled dirt, and let your horses graze. It's almost nice, suspiciously nice. You sleep with your knife in your hand and your back to a tree. It doesn't last. The moment you're past their territory, another tribe ambushes your supply line. You lose 4 wagons, 2 oxen, and all the decent wine. You kill a few of theirs, they kill a few of yours. Nobody learns anything. You keep moving, dragging what's left of your gear through terrain that hates the idea of forward momentum. The only thing more miserable than the march is the sound of screaming horses. One of them slips on a muddy slope and snaps its leg with a sound like wet wood breaking. The handler tries to keep it calm, but the horse knows. It always knows. The officer puts a spear through its skull and doesn't speak for the rest of the day. That night, no one talks around the fire. You finally reach the far side of Gaul, not because you conquered it, but because it eventually stopped resisting. What you leave behind is a trail of broken carts, shattered bodies, and hoof prints deep enough to fill with blood. The Alps loom ahead, impossibly tall, already dusted with snow. You're thinner now, hungrier, colder, and the worst part is this was the flat part. You've seen men die in swamps. You've seen elephants flail their way into rivers. You've seen a horse try to eat a man's severed finger, and you didn't even blink. But nothing unnerves you quite like seeing Hannibal smile. It's not that it's a bad smile. It's a perfectly charming one, really. Confident, warm, a little too clean for someone who's dragged an army through Gaul. That's the problem. He looks like he knows something the rest of you don't. And when a man smiles at the base of the Alps, that usually means he's gone mad. He gathers you all just before the ascent, or as many of you as can still walk without bleeding from somewhere important. The army's thinner now, smaller, not in that proud, disciplined, battle-tested way, more in the we've lost a third of our friends and most of our ability to care way. You stand in a clearing surrounded by pine trees that whisper like they're trying not to wake the mountains. Hannibal rides to the front, flanked by officers who somehow still have matching armour and fresh cloaks. You stink like wet leather and infected blisters. He, impossibly, does not. The speech begins, as these speeches always do, with the usual honour, destiny, legacy. You're going to change the world. You're going to strike Rome where it hurts. The Alps? Just another obstacle. You'll make it through. You'll be legends. You'll be remembered. You nod because nodding is safer than thinking. You pretend your knees aren't shaking. You pretend you don't see the vultures already circling overhead, just in case. You don't hear half of what he says. Not really. Your stomach is making too much noise. It's been 2 days since your last full meal, and that was mostly dried beans and something that might have been meat before it changed colour. Your boots are full of water and whatever disease water turns into when left to stew inside a sock for a week. You're fairly certain a worm is living in the blister behind your left heel. Every breath you take feels like it has to squeeze through something heavy sitting on your chest. Still, you cheer when everyone else does. Not because you're inspired, but because an officer is watching you from the side, and you've learned the hard way that not cheering looks a lot like treason. The man is magnetic. That's the worst part. Hannibal could talk a frog into volunteering for a forest fire. When he speaks, it feels like you're part of something bigger. It feels like maybe, just maybe, this isn't suicide by geography. He paints pictures with words. You don't understand half the references. They involve ancestors you've never heard of and gods you stopped praying to after Spain. But you find yourself nodding anyway. You need something to believe in. And for now, belief is wearing a bright red cloak and an expression that says, "We're going to be fine." Some men weep, others raise their weapons and shout. You grip your spear like it means something. Hannibal rides along the front lines afterward, looking each man in the eye like he's memorizing your face. When he reaches you, he stops, just for a moment. His horse snorts. He leans slightly in your direction and says, "We're going to take history by the throat." Then he's gone, trotting down the line before you can think of anything to say. You don't know what it means. You just know your hands are shaking. There's a moment afterward, a strange one, where it feels like maybe this is going to work. Not because the situation's improved, it hasn't. The mountains are still there. The weather's still turning. You're still hungry, cold, undertrained, and surrounded by an army that smells like regret. But there's something in the air now. A false hope. A shared delusion. It binds the men together like spit and straw, fragile but sticky. You feel it catch in your throat and decide not to cough. Then come the orders. Pack light. Wrap your feet tighter. We're moving at dawn. The trail will be narrow. If you fall, don't scream. It demoralizes the others. If the elephants slip, get out of the way. If the pack animals panic, let them go. And if anyone talks about turning back, report them. The officers don't say what happens to those who lose faith. They don't need to. You spend that night in shallow sleep. Not rest. You haven't truly rested in weeks. But that anxious kind of dozing where your brain hovers just above panic and your body stays locked in a crouch. The wind through the trees sounds like laughter. Your dreams are all falling. When you wake, your fingers are numb. The mountains don't greet you, they loom. They rise out of the earth like some ancient curse, their white peaks catching the sun in a way that almost looks beautiful, until you remember you're going to be climbing them. On foot, with the same shoes you wore in the swamps of Gaul, shoes that now resemble damp, unravelling strips of regret tied together with twine. You stare upward and realise there's no path, just the idea of one, and the promise that if you keep going long enough, it might turn into something less deadly. The ascent starts deceptively. Gentle inclines, fir trees dusted with snow, crisp air that stings but doesn't quite bite. You almost think, for the first few miles, that maybe the worst is behind you. Maybe Hannibal was right. Maybe this is just another march, just higher. Then the trees vanish, the air thins, the wind sharpens, and the trail, if you can even call it that, tilts steeply upward, like the land is trying to shake you off. The cold doesn't hit all at once. It creeps. Your fingertips go numb, then your toes, then the parts of you thought were safely layered. You try to adjust your cloak, only to find it frozen stiff across your back. Your breath fogs so thick it feels like you're walking through your own failing lungs. Someone ahead of you coughs blood into the snow and keeps walking. You wonder how much is too much before your body gives out. You'll probably find out soon. The path is narrow, insultingly narrow, hugging the edge of cliffs that drop into nothing. There's no railing, no rope, just loose rock, slush, and the sound of 1,000 boots trying not to slip. You hear the first scream about an hour in. It echoes strangely. A long, rising howl cut short by a wet crunch you don't want to think about. No one stops to look. There's nowhere to stop. If you stand still too long, someone will walk into you, and both of you will fall. Blizzards roll in without warning. One moment, the sky is grey. The next, it's white. White above, white below, white in every direction until you can't tell if you're walking forward or slowly spinning in place. You wrap a strip of cloth over your face and hold on to the man ahead of you, like a lifeline. When he slips, you let go. You have to. You can't follow him down. The officers say it's only a few days crossing. They say that like days still mean anything. You've lost track of how long you've been in the mountains. One day bleeds into the next. You sleep in fits, curled beneath overhangs, or pressed against rocks that leach the warmth from your spine. You dream of sunlight and soft earth, and then wake with snow in your mouth and your blanket frozen to the ground. Your hands tremble constantly. You no longer know if it's fear, cold, or just something breaking inside you. The animals fare no better. The pack mules panic on the narrow ledges, their eyes wide, their hooves slipping on ice. One goes over the edge and takes 2 men with it. The elephants don't panic, not at first. They plod upward with wide, uncertain steps, steaming in the cold like walking bonfires. But the altitude wears on them. Their ears freeze. Their trunks hang limp. One collapses mid-trail, legs buckling, and doesn't get back up. It takes hours to move around its body. You have to dig a new path through the snow beside it. You don't know what happened to the beast after that. You never saw it again. Food is scarce. You were told there would be caches along the route, hidden supplies prepared by allies or scouts. Either they were never there, or someone got to them first. You boil snow. You gnaw on scraps of dried meat too tough to swallow. You chew pine bark because someone swears it's edible. It isn't. Your belly cramps with hunger, then quiets. That silence is worse than the growling. It means your body has stopped expecting help. Men go mad. It happens quietly. A soldier ahead of you starts humming a song no one knows. He doesn't stop. He hums through the night, through the snow, through the moment he walks off the edge of the path without a sound. Another man begins talking to a rock he swears is his wife. You try not to listen. You try not to talk at all. Words feel like luxuries now. You need your breath for climbing. The worst are the ones who just sit down. They don't scream. They don't run. They just stop, fold their arms around themselves, and curl up on the side of the trail like they're taking a short rest. You pass 3 of them in a single morning. None get back up. You learn to stop looking at faces. They all start to blur together. Blue-lipped, frostbitten, eyes wide or closed. It doesn't matter. You keep moving because moving is all that's left. There's no more thought, no more fear, just one foot, then the other, up and up and up into wind that hates you, and air that forgets to carry oxygen. Your vision narrows. The world shrinks to the boots in front of you, and the noise of your own teeth grinding together. You're not surviving anymore. You're just continuing. There's a difference, and through it all the mountain watches. It never speaks, never shifts, never blinks, just looms above you like a reminder that this place does not care if you make it through. The mountain has swallowed armies before. It will swallow you too if it wants. And if it doesn't, it's not mercy, it's apathy. You begin to understand something terrible, that this isn't the worst of it, that you haven't yet reached the top, that there's still more of this, more cold, more death, more slow motion misery. You think of Hannibal's smile and realise it wasn't confidence, it was resignation. He knew exactly what was coming, and he walked into it anyway. Now so have you. You're not sure when it stops being a march and starts being something else. Not a retreat. There's nowhere to retreat to. Not a campaign. That implies progress. It's more like a crawl through a world that has forgotten the concept of warmth. The trail narrows even further, winding across slopes of loose shale and glare ice that shifts under your feet like it's trying to kill you on purpose. You're not walking anymore. You're inching, slipping, staggering forward one numb foot at a time. Your fingers don't work. They've curled into claws inside your sleeves, and no amount of rubbing or breathing on them seems to bring them back. You dropped your spear hours ago and couldn't feel it leave your hand. Your lips are cracked and bleeding. Your breath stings going in and burns coming out. You haven't spoken in over a day, and neither has anyone else. There's nothing left to say. The elephants are the first to break. They were never meant for this altitude, this cold. You watch them stumble and shiver, their massive frames somehow small against the cliffs. One slips on a sheet of ice, thrashes sideways, and crashes into a ledge. The sound of it falling is slow and final. Crashing stone, splitting bone. Something large groaning deep in its chest, before silence swallows it whole. The rest of the animals freeze. Then they keep moving, because even they know that stopping is a slower death. The pack animals aren't faring much better. Mules collapse where they stand, legs giving out beneath loads they've carried for weeks. When one goes down, the others have to climb around it, often slipping, sometimes falling themselves. The path is slick with blood and waste and ice. You try not to look down, not at the drop, and not at the things you're stepping over. You stopped checking to see if they were alive 2 days ago. If they're not moving, you keep walking. Your friend, the one you've marched beside since Spain, pulls down his scarf and shows you his nose. It's black. The tip, anyway. Frostbite. You don't know what to say. Neither does he. You both stare at it for a moment, like it belongs to someone else. Then he pulls the scarf back up and keeps moving. Later that day, he stops answering when you call his name. The next morning, he's gone. Maybe he walked off the path. Maybe he laid down and froze. Maybe something found him in the dark. You don't ask. The wolves come at night. You don't see them, but you hear them. Distant howls too many to count. Someone says they're just after the dead, that they won't attack the living, that someone is wrong. A deserter tries to break off from the column under cover of darkness. He says he's going back down, that death is certain up ahead and maybe less certain behind. The next morning, you find what's left of him about 50 feet from the trail. His throat's been torn out. His legs are missing. You hope the wolves were quick about it. You doubt it. The officers stop making speeches. They used to shout commands, give encouragement, bark threats. Now they walk in silence like the rest of you. Eyes sunken, mouths cracked, swords dragging in the snow. One of them rides a horse that's barely alive, foam crusted on its muzzle, ribs showing through its coat. When the horse finally collapses, the officer doesn't even curse. He just gets off and keeps walking, one hand still clutching the reins, like he's forgotten to let go. You pass another elephant corpse on the third day. This one's still partially upright, half frozen into a standing position. Its eyes are open, covered in frost. Its skin has cracked along its legs. Steam still rises faintly from its body. A soldier touches it on the shoulder, like it's going to speak. Then he walks away. You understand the impulse. The elephants are the last lie you still believed. That somehow this march had meaning. That it was built on strength, on spectacle, on survival. But now they're dying too. Quietly, pointlessly. Just like the rest of you. Someone slips on a patch of ice and grabs your arm. The weight pulls you sideways. For a moment, you're sure you're both going over. Somehow, you manage to dig in and stay upright. The man doesn't thank you. You don't expect him to. You don't even look at each other. That's how thin the thread has become. There's no time for camaraderie, just friction, inertia, and gravity. Sleep is no longer restful. It's a negotiation with death. You close your eyes in short bursts, always curled in on yourself, always shivering. You dream of warmth and wake to teeth chattering so hard, you bite your own tongue. You've started wrapping your feet in strips of cloth cut from your blanket. It helps a little. The skin on your toes has gone waxy. You try not to think about what colour it will be tomorrow. No one sings anymore. No one whistles or hums or even mutters under their breath. The silence is thick, heavier than snow. You'd welcome an avalanche, honestly. At least it would mean something was happening, something final. Instead, there's just a slow decay of bodies and morale, trudging endlessly upward into the kind of cold that makes time meaningless. You reach another pass, another ridge, another section of trail that feels identical to the last, and you realise you no longer care what day it is. You're not even sure it matters whether you make it to Italy, whether the campaign succeeds, whether Rome burns or doesn't. You've become a shape moving through pain, a figure etched into ice. You don't know your own face anymore. You only know the next step, and then the next, and then the next, and still the mountain rises. It begins with a sound you almost don't hear. Not a roar, not the thunderous crashing you imagined from stories. Just a low groan, deep and wide, like the earth exhaling through gritted teeth. You pause halfway through stepping over a fallen pack mule, and the snow beneath your feet shudders, not violently, not enough to send you flying, just enough to make your spine lock up. Then comes the silence, and that's when you understand something terrible is about to happen. The slope above you breaks, not in chunks, not in one dramatic slide. It moves like water, impossibly fast, sickeningly smooth, a wall of white cascading downward with the weight of every mistake you've made in the last year. It doesn't shout as it comes, it doesn't rage, it hisses, a sharp slicing whisper as it eats everything in its path. You try to run, you all do, but there's nowhere to run to. The trail is narrow. The drop on your left is a sheer cliff. The wall on your right is too steep to climb. You're not outrunning this. You're not even escaping it. Your foot slips before you get 5 paces, you hit the ground hard, shield cracking beneath you, and then it's just snow. Snow above you, snow beneath you, snow filling your mouth and freezing your ears and pressing against your ribs, like it's trying to squeeze the life out of your lungs. When it stops, you think you might be dead. You can't move. You can barely breathe. Your legs are pinned under something heavy, a body maybe, or just compacted ice. The silence afterward is thick and cruel, the kind of silence that doesn't wait for answers. You lie there for what might be minutes or hours. Eventually, your hand finds a piece of leather, someone else's boot, half frozen, and you claw upward, slowly, blindly, until your face breaches into open air and you gasp like a drowning man, finally reaching the surface of a poisoned river. You're lucky. Most aren't. All around you, the snow is broken by lumps. Some move, most don't. The men who are ahead of you are gone. Buried, flattened, swallowed whole. One officer, a man you've followed since Hispania, is visible from the waist up. You dig him out using your hands, then your boot, then a piece of splintered shield. When you reach his torso, you realise you're not going to find the legs. You stop digging. He doesn't speak. Neither do you. The avalanche doesn't just take bodies, it takes structure. Order. Whatever was left of the army's chain of command dissolves. The officers who survive spend the next day wandering from cluster to cluster, trying to reassemble units that don't exist anymore. No one salutes, no one asks for orders. The only thing anyone wants to know is if there's another slide coming. The weather doesn't improve. The snow keeps falling, not fast, not heavy, just enough to keep the trail covered and the dead hidden. You trip over frozen limbs more than once. At some point you stop apologising. Someone tries to mark the edge of the trail with branches. The wind steals them before the hour's out. Every day you lose more men. Not to combat, not to starvation, just to the landscape. The mountain doesn't fight you. It doesn't need to, it just waits. There are whispers that Hannibal survived, that he was ahead of the worst of it, that he dug men out with his own hands. You don't know if it's true, you don't care. No one looks to him now. They're too busy keeping their heads down and their feet moving. Belief doesn't hold up well under snowpack. Myth freezes like everything else. The elephants are nearly gone. 2, maybe 3 remain. They walk with visible pain, their massive feet cracked and bleeding, their eyes sunken. One collapses beside a switchback. Its driver tries to rouse it, shouting, weeping, throwing handfuls of snow at its face like that will help. It doesn't. The elephant lies still. The man keeps screaming until someone pulls him away. You pass them both in silence. Nights are the worst. You build fires when you can, if there's enough dry wood, if the wind allows. You huddle together in tight circles, sharing what little heat you have. Some of the men try to sing. Their voices are raw, trembling. The songs don't last long. One night, you dream that the mountain speaks. You wake up crying, and you don't know why. Your body is failing. Your joints ache like they're filled with sand. Your fingers are stiff. Your feet nearly useless. The skin on your thighs is splitting open in thin red cracks. You've stopped feeling hunger. Your stomach still grumbles out of habit, but there's no sharpness to it anymore. Just a dull, empty ache that sits in your gut like a stone. The trail has become meaningless. There's no clear destination, no banners, no rally points, just forward, always forward. Men disappears into the snow and don't come back. No one calls for them. No one sends search parties. That was before the avalanche, before the line between missing and buried forever became so thin you stopped caring. Eventually someone jokes that if the Romans are on the other side, they'll probably be cold too. No one laughs. Someone else says they hope the Romans kill them quickly. That gets a few nods. You say nothing. You just keep walking because that's all that's left. You can't go back. You can't stop. The mountain won't let you. And deep down, you suspect that even if you make it out, something inside you never will. The food ran out days ago. That part you remember. But it's hard to say when exactly the hunger stopped being a sensation and started becoming a condition. Not something you feel, but something you are. Hunger isn't sharp anymore. It doesn't twist your gut or make you cry. It's just there, woven into your bones like frost. You don't say you're hungry, you say you haven't eaten. Because hunger implies a problem that can be solved. At first you rationed. Dried meat, hard biscuit, something vaguely green that might have once been a vegetable. You counted out crumbs. You whispered about sharing. Then someone ate too much, someone else had none, and the rest gave up. The last official meal was gone in less than an hour. After that, the officers pretended to still have supply plans. You pretended to believe them. It was easier than accepting the truth. There is nothing left. You tried the snow, of course. It seemed clean enough, pure even. You melted it in tin bowls, cupping your hands around the heat like it was holy. Then the snow started tasting like rot, like old blood and unwashed wool, and the bottom of a dead man's boot. You drink it anyway. Your body needs liquid. Your mind tells you you'll die without it. Your body shrugs and starts digesting itself instead. The first to boil his belt does it in secret. He cuts it into strips, softens it over the fire, and chews for an hour like a dog gnawing cartilage. The smell is awful, burnt hide and desperation. But when he doesn't die, others follow. You slice off a chunk of your sandal and soak it until it bends. Then you bite. It doesn't taste like anything. It doesn't feel like food, but it gives your jaw something to do besides chatter. Someone tries to eat parchment. It's all they have left, a page torn from a journal, browned at the edges. They chew it slowly, folding it into mush. You don't judge them. You're past judgment. You'd eat ash if you thought it had calories. You'd eat the stitching out of your cloak. You already have. One man digs through the snow for roots. Another scrapes lichen off a rock and swears it kept him alive for a day. One claims he saw a bird and ran after it, only to come back empty-handed and bleeding from the knees. A few gather pine needles and boil them into tea that tastes like smoke and acid. It doesn't help, but it gives them something to hold. Your skin is tighter now. It stretches oddly over your ribs. Your cheeks are hollow. Your breath rattles. The cold sinks deeper with every hour, like it's rooting around inside your organs, looking for something to ruin. You hallucinate that you're warm. You're not. You know you're not, but the trick your brain plays is almost convincing. You remove your gloves. Your fingers are purple. They no longer respond when you tell them to close. You can't remember the last time you saw firewood. You burn scraps of gear now. Broken spears, snapped arrows, torn leather. Someone burns a shield. Another burns part of a dead man's sled. It's hard to watch, but it's harder to be cold. You rotate around the flame like desperate insects, too weak to speak, faces glowing in the flicker. You all look skeletal. You all stink of sweat, smoke, and surrender. Your thoughts come slower now. They drift in like fog, hang around uselessly, and disappear. Sometimes you try to count your steps, but you lose track after 10. Sometimes you mutter to yourself, just to hear a voice. It doesn't help. You forget words, you forget names, you forget why you're even going to Italy. Victory? Revenge? Glory? They all sound like someone else's hallucination. A man near you dies sitting up. He's got something in his mouth. You think it's a bit of cloth. Maybe he thought it was bread. Maybe he didn't care. No one moves his body. No one says anything. You step around him like he's a rock. You pass an animal carcass that's been stripped to the bone. Not cleanly, not by wolves. The marks are from knives, ragged, frantic cuts like someone didn't know what they were doing or didn't have time to be careful. You see teeth marks too, human. You walk faster, even though your legs are barely responding. You're not afraid of dying. You're afraid of what happens to your body afterward. The officers have stopped counting the dead. They stopped assigning rations days ago, and now they don't even try to lead. They walk among you like ghosts in better clothing, eyes wide, mouths shut. One of them drops to his knees mid-step. He doesn't get back up. Another just wanders off the trail and vanishes into the mist. Nobody follows. Nobody calls out. That would mean using your voice, and no one has energy to waste on noise. You used to dream about food, banquets, bread, stew thick enough to stand a spoon in. Now you don't even remember what hunger dreams feel like. Now you dream about empty rooms, cold spaces, places where nothing moves and nothing needs you. You wake with your tongue stuck to your teeth and your muscles clenched like you've been bracing for impact. You probably have. Someone suggests eating a corpse. No one answers. No one agrees, but no one argues either. The idea hangs there, weightless, unspoken, like frost in the air. You don't know what you'd do if it came to that. You're afraid to find out. The mountain isn't killing you quickly. It's unmaking you, stripping away what's human piece by piece until all that's left is a crawling thing, thin and blank-eyed, walking because walking is the only thing it remembers how to do. You're still alive, but you've started to wonder if that's the worst possible outcome. You don't remember when the first one ran. Maybe he didn't run exactly. Maybe he just stepped off the trail one morning and kept walking into the mist, boots crunching quietly, shoulders hunched like he knew no one was going to stop him. You watched him go, half expecting someone to shout, to chase, to drag him back. No one did. The line kept moving. The snow kept falling. He disappeared into the white, and that was that. Desertion used to be a crime, used to earn you lashes or execution, or at least a well-rehearsed threat shouted by an officer with something to prove. But now, it's just a shrug. The officers don't have the energy to chase anyone. Most of them are thinking about running themselves. You can see it in their eyes, that hollow calculation. Would I make it? Could I slip away at night? Do I even care what happens next? Some of them do slip away. Others talk about it, then fall asleep and never wake up. You start seeing the signs before it happens. A man starts walking slower, lags behind, avoids eye contact. One night, he doesn't show up at the fire. The next morning, he's gone. Not dead, not buried, just missing. You don't ask anymore. The questions died somewhere back on the last frozen ridge. You try not to think about escape. You know better. You know there's nowhere to run. Not really. You're too high, too lost, too far from anything that could be called civilization. The trail behind you is snowed in and scattered with corpses. The trail ahead is worse. Even if you turn back, what would you eat? How would you find shelter? Which pack of wolves would be the first to find you? And yet, you still think about it. You think about it in the early morning, when your body is too stiff to stand, and the fire has burned out, and your stomach feels like an echo chamber. You think about it when the snow falls heavy and soft and seems almost gentle, like it might let you lie down for a little while, if you just stopped pretending you're going somewhere. You think about it when a man near you collapses mid-step, and nobody moves to help. That's when you realise you're thinking about it too often. Then one night, you try. You don't plan it. You don't even mean to. You just keep walking after the others stop. You take a left where the trail bends right. You descend through a stand of stunted pine trees, your hands brushing the trunks like they might hold you upright. The wind doesn't scream that night. It whispers, and that feels like permission. You don't make it far. The snow is deep and uneven. You lose your footing twice. Your foot plunges into a hole and nearly snaps at the ankle. Your breath starts to rasp. You see shapes in the dark. Not wolves, not men, just shapes. And your chest tightens. You think you're heading down, but then the slope drops sharply, and you have to crawl. You keep going anyway, crawling like an animal, hands numb, eyes squinting through the fog, trying to remember what it was you thought you'd find out here. Eventually, you stop. Not because you've changed your mind or because you've realised how foolish it all is. You stop because your body has decided it's finished. Your knees give out. Your hands won't close. Your heart hammers once, twice, then slows to a quiet knock. You sit in the snow, breathing through your mouth, watching your own chest rise like it belongs to someone else. You feel detached, weightless, like this wasn't a decision you made, like it was always going to happen this way. Somewhere in the dark you hear howling, distant, hungry, closer than it should be. You should be afraid you're not. You feel nothing. Not calm, not despair, just absence. The part of you that cared burned out days ago. The part of you that believed in orders, in victory, in getting through this alive. That part died long before your friend did. All that's left is this husk of meat and breath and reflex. And even those are starting to shut down. You might have stayed there. Had someone not found you, you don't know who it was. A soldier maybe? An officer? Though that seems unlikely. You just remember a rough hand grabbing your collar, dragging you upright, cursing under their breath, like they were angry you'd made them do this. You don't remember walking back. You don't remember lying down. You remember waking up to the heat of a fire on your face and the taste of leather between your teeth and nothing else. No one mentions it later. No one asks where you went or why, because everyone understands, not openly, not with words, but in the way they look at each other when someone falls behind, in the way they don't stop anyone from trying again. You're not alone in this. Everyone has imagined walking away. Everyone has imagined dying out there, in the quiet, in the dark, away from the stink of the army and the eyes of men too exhausted to care anymore. You don't try again. Not because you've changed your mind, you still want out. You still dream of disappearing into the fog and becoming a shape no one remembers. But now you know the truth. There's nowhere to go. Not down the mountain, not through it, not around it. The only way out is through, and the only thing waiting on the other side is more of the same. So you walk. Because your body will keep walking until it doesn't. Because someone behind you might step on your hand if you fall. Because the mountain hasn't quite finished with you yet. And because, at this point, continuing is the closest thing you have left to meaning. You always assumed going down would be easier. That was the hope that kept you moving through the ice, the wind, and the hallucinations. That once you reached the top, if you reached the top, it would be downhill from there, literally and metaphorically. But the mountain doesn't reward effort. It doesn't hand out mercy for persistence. It waits until your body is frayed and your mind half dismantled, then offers you one final insult, the descent. The first thing you notice is the slope. Too steep, too slick, and too narrow. The snow is thin here, thinned by wind and foot traffic, exposing frozen rock that offers no traction and plenty of sharp angles. You thought climbing was hard because of exhaustion? You discover quickly that descending is worse because of momentum. Gravity becomes your enemy now. It grabs at your ankles, pulls at your spine, and punishes every mistake with acceleration. The first man to fall does so in silence. 1 second, he's ahead of you, shuffling down a curve in the trail, arms out for balance. The next, he's gone. Not a cry, not a curse, just gone. You hear the scraping sound his body makes as it bounces off stone, and then nothing. A few men stop and look. No one moves to help. There's no path down, no way back up. You keep walking. Your balance isn't what it was. Your legs tremble with every step. Your feet slide sideways more often than forward. The leather strips you wrapped around your boots days ago have hardened into stiff curls that do more harm than good. You try to brace yourself with your spear, but the ice doesn't care. It snaps under your weight and leaves you with a jagged stick and a mouthful of snow. Some men try to sit and slide, reasoning that a slow fall is better than a fast one. That works until they hit a patch of bare rock and spin sideways into the abyss. Others try to form lines, linking arms for stability, but the terrain breaks them apart with every twist in the trail. You see pairs of men tumbling down together, locked in death grips that neither one asked for. The mules are gone. The last of them died just before the summit, slipping on a frozen ledge and taking half your unit's remaining gear with them. You remember the sound they made. Not a bray, not a scream, just a long, awful groan as they tumbled over the side, limbs flailing in that slow, helpless way that only makes it worse. You haven't seen an intact supply sled in days. You haven't seen proper food in longer. You haven't looked at your feet in a while. You do now, and you wish you hadn't. The toes on your left foot are black. Not dark purple, not bruised, black, dead. You wiggle them to test for feeling and feel nothing. You press one with the butt of your spear and it doesn't react. You try not to panic, but you know what this means. That foot is already gone. You're just waiting for the rest of you to catch up. You pass a man who's sitting upright against a rock, legs sprawled, face turned toward the trail. At first you think he's resting. Then you see the icicles in his beard and the way his eyes don't blink. He froze there, mid-sit, mid-breath, mid-thought, like a statue carved out of regret. No one bothers to bury him. The earth is too hard, the snow too shallow, and the living too tired. You sleep in fits again, curled beside the trail or under ledges that barely break the wind. You're lower now, but it doesn't feel warmer. The cold still reaches you, still gnaws at your joints, still whispers in your ear while you sleep. You keep your arms wrapped tight around your ribs, but you can't stop shaking. Your body burns from the inside, like it's trying to heat itself with the last scraps of your sanity. The officers stop pretending this is a march. They've stopped giving directions altogether. They move like prisoners now, blank-eyed and slow. When one dies in the night, freezing quietly in his saddle, arms wrapped around a map no one will ever use again, the rest of you don't even pause. You take the boots, if they're better than your own. You take the cloak, if it's not frozen through. Then you walk on. Every now and then you see the valley below. Not close, never close, but there distant and greenish like the memory of springtime in someone else's dream. That's Italy. That's the goal. That's where you're supposed to fight the Romans. You can't imagine fighting anyone right now. You can barely lift your arms. You try to picture holding a sword, swinging it, surviving another campaign, and the thought is so ridiculous, you almost laugh. Almost. You slip again. Catch yourself. Walk. Slip. Catch. Walk. That's the rhythm now. That's the beat of your life. One man behind you is chanting under his breath, a low hoarse mantra that might be a prayer, or just the last bit of language his brain remembers. Another is crying silently, tears freezing before they leave his cheeks. No one offers comfort. What would you say? That it's going to be all right? You reach a point where the trail widens just enough for two men to fall at once. You know this because they do, right beside you. One slips, he hits the other, and both go over the edge in a blur of arms and spears and boots. You hear them strike rock once, then silence. You don't look down. You don't have the energy to be horrified anymore. You keep descending, and every step you wonder how many more your body can take. How many more cracks in the ice? How many more dead faces? How many more nights with no food, no fire, no hope? You've made it through the worst, they say. But it doesn't feel like that. It feels like the mountain is still punishing you, just with a different weapon. Because coming down doesn't mean it's over. It just means gravity gets to help now. There's no fanfare when you reach Italy. No cheering crowds, no victory parade, no warm meal and dry clothes waiting by a crackling fire. There's just dirt, a strip of flat, frozen ground leading into yet another valley, with nothing but silence stretching out ahead of you. You cross the last miserable bend in the trail and realise you've done it. You've crossed the Alps. You thought it would feel like triumph. It doesn't. It feels like sitting down in the snow and coughing until something wet comes up. You're not sure how long you lie there. Time has no meaning anymore. It's just a series of blinks between disasters. Someone stumbles past you and mutters something in a language you don't recognise. Or maybe you do, and your brain has stopped bothering to translate. You look at your hands and see that the skin is cracked in half a dozen places, black around the fingernails, and bleeding between the knuckles. You've stopped feeling pain, which is somehow worse than still feeling it. Your clothes are no longer garments. They've become a second skin, frozen stiff, crusted with sweat, blood, and something you gave up identifying weeks ago. You tried to change your socks back in the mountains and left half your foot inside the boot. You walk with a limp now. Everyone does. It's the only uniform left. The elephants are mostly gone. A few made it through somehow, towering wrecks of creatures, gaunt and limping, swaying as they walk like drunken gods. You don't even look at them anymore. They're not symbols, they're reminders of what it took to get here, of what you left behind, of how even the biggest, strongest things in the world can be broken by weather and time and gravity. You stand up eventually and follow the column. What's left of it? You don't even know how many of you are still alive. There were tens of thousands at the start. Now there are fewer, maybe half, maybe less. No one's counting anymore. The officers used to keep lists. Now they just walk silently at the front, looking as ruined as the rest of you. You march into Italy, with your head down and your body falling apart. The fields are green again. The air smells different, softer, less like rot and more like wet leaves and distant farms. You can hear birds again. That almost breaks you, because birds mean life, and life after everything you've just seen feels like an insult. The locals watch you from a distance. They don't cheer, they don't scream, they just stare, half in awe, half in horror. You can't blame them. You wouldn't want this army marching through your fields either. You're not glorious, you're not fearsome, you're starving men in tattered clothes, dragging rusted weapons and rotting feet through someone else's backyard. Hannibal appears again, like a ghost dressed in red. He's thinner now, but still upright, still talking, like this was all part of the plan. He congratulates the survivors, promises Rome will fall, swears that history will remember this crossing as the stuff of legend. You nod along, like you believe him. What else are you supposed to do? Slap him? Fall on your sword? Neither would change the fact that you're here, and the war hasn't even started yet. Because yes, there's a war, still coming, still waiting. You didn't cross the Alps to find peace, you crossed them to kill Romans. That part hasn't changed. You're expected to fight soon, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week. You're expected to pick up your dented helmet, patch your broken sandals, and stand in formation like a proper soldier, as if your body isn't falling apart, as if your spirit didn't freeze somewhere near the summit and slide off a cliff with the rest of your hope. You cough again. It hurts now. That's a bad sign. You spit into the grass and see red. You cover it quickly. Don't want to be marked as useless. Not this close to being needed again. You don't want to die in a ditch before the next phase even begins. A few of the younger recruits look at the horizon like it means something. They still believe. Or at least pretend to. You try not to hate them for it. It's not their fault they weren't there when the trail vanished beneath your feet, when the avalanche took the commander, when the mule train fell screaming into a ravine. Let them dream of victory. You'll be the one standing behind them when they find out what it costs. You pass a creek and stop to drink. The water is clear, almost beautiful. You dip your hands in and feel nothing. Your fingertips are too far gone. But you watch the water swirl and think about the rivers back home. The warm ones, the ones that didn't try to kill you. You can't remember their names, just the way they felt on your skin before everything became survival. Someone slaps you on the shoulder and says, "We made it." You nod, but in your head, you're still climbing, still sliding, still crawling past corpses with no faces. You haven't made it. You've just paused in a different kind of misery. So here you are, in Italy. Congratulations, you've made it across the Alps with nothing but a ruined body, a cracked mind, and the knowledge that your reward for surviving the worst march in recorded history is to march again, into another war, into another battlefield, into another chapter of someone else's story, one where your name won't even be a footnote. You're not a hero, you're just alive, and somehow that feels like the most useless thing of all. They'll write about this eventually, not soon, not in your lifetime, assuming you live long enough to have what could generously be called an end. But someday, a man with a pen will sit in a stone building somewhere safe, somewhere dry, and he'll write about Hannibal's march over the Alps. He'll use words like brilliant and audacious. He'll praise the strategy, the scale, the sheer impossibility of it, and he will never mention you, not by name, not even by number. You'll be a line in a casualty estimate, if that, folded into a phrase like heavy attrition or significant losses. Your frostbite, your hunger, your bleeding gums and shattered morale, they will be smoothed into neat historical shorthand. No one will write about the way your friend died coughing into a pile of slush. No one will care that you watched a man boil his sandal and eat it in silence, chewing until his teeth cracked from the effort. They will remember the elephants. Oh yes, the elephants, as if they made the crossing in triumph instead of terror, trumpeting not in confusion, but in glory, as if they weren't dragged uphill in panic, half-starved, freezing to death in the wind, while the mountain picked them off one by one. They'll be painted on scrolls and carved into marble, the noble beasts of war, the symbol of Hannibal's genius. You, meanwhile, will be somewhere beneath one of them, in spirit if not in flesh, buried under the same snow that swallowed most of your unit. Hannibal himself will become legend, a brilliant commander, a master of tactics, a thorn in Rome's side. They'll call him bold, daring. They won't call him lucky or reckless or mad. They won't mention the men he abandoned on the cliffs, the soldiers who froze beside their weapons, the ones who died not in battle, but in slow-motion collapse beneath an uncaring sky. They won't say he smiled while you bled. They'll say he was destined for greatness, and because no one survived long enough to contradict that, it will become true. You'll be forgotten because you were ordinary, because you were just one of the many. You didn't give a speech, you didn't lead a charge, you didn't do anything that could be etched in stone without someone asking, "Who was that again?" All you did was suffer, quietly, daily, thoroughly, and history does not have time for quiet suffering. It likes noise, pageantry, clean endings. You think about that as you sit near the river, your feet soaking in the cold water, trying to rinse off a layer of filth that's become part of your skin. You pick at a wound on your ankle that refuses to close. You stare at the horizon and wonder what it would take to just keep walking until you disappear over it. But you won't. You'll go where they tell you to go, stand where they tell you to stand, die when they say it's time, and someone else will take the credit for whatever happens next. No one will write about the smell, the way the army stank in the mountains, not just of sweat and blood, but of infection, rot, and fear. No one will write about the way men cried in their sleep or called out for mothers they hadn't seen in decades. No one will mention how some soldiers went blind in the snow, how others ripped their own nails out in frustration because it was the only pain they still had control over. They'll remember the outcome, not the process. That's how it always is. The suffering is just scaffolding for someone else's monument. Even the survivors won't remember you properly. The ones who make it back will blur your name with someone else's. They'll remember a version of you, stronger, braver, cleaner. They'll tell stories around fires about the men who fell beside them. They'll embellish because no one wants to admit the truth, that most of the people who died out there didn't do anything dramatic. They just faded, quietly, softly, like a light going out in a distant window. Maybe one of them will remember you tripping on a stone, or laughing once before everything turned to ice. Maybe they'll remember that time you caught a louse in your blanket and declared war on the rest. Maybe they'll remember the way you looked when your teeth started falling out, or the song you tried to sing before your voice cracked and gave up. But those memories die when they do, and they will die soon. So, no, history will not remember you. You will not be honoured in poems. You will not be studied by generals or quoted in speeches. Your grave, if you get one, will be unmarked. Your body will feed the dirt, or the animals, or the cold itself, and the story of Hannibal's impossible crossing will carry on without you. Polished, simplified, hollow. You didn't march for glory, you marched because someone told you to. You didn't die for a cause, you died because the weather didn't care. And now that you're gone, or as good as, the world will keep turning like it never noticed you were here at all. And maybe in the end, that's the real cost of greatness. You lay down finally, not because the march is over, not because you've reached anything that could be called safety, and certainly not because you've earned it. You lie down because your body refuses to keep going. Your legs stop working in unison. Your hands hang limp. Your knees give out. You find a flat patch of dirt under a tree, that doesn't look like it's about to fall on you and drop into it like a sack of old grain. You don't even unstrap your boots. What would be the point? Your feet are more bandage than flesh now. The ground is cold, of course it is, but it feels almost familiar, like the pressure of a hand on your shoulder. Not kind, but present. You sink into it as much as it sinks into you. Your breath fogs and fades. You stare at the sky through a canopy of skeletal branches, and for the first time in weeks, you don't feel the need to move. The stars overhead don't seem to care that you're here. That's comforting in a way. The wind moves through the trees and the mountain passes with a low, bone-deep moan. It sounds less like weather and more like memory, stretched thin, pulled long, echoing through empty spaces. It whistles past your ear like it's trying to remind you of something, though whatever it is has already slipped from your mind. You close your eyes and the wind continues, talking to no one in particular. Around you, the remnants of the army are curling into themselves, not sleeping exactly, just pausing between collapses. Some are pressed against trees, some are half buried in their cloaks, heads down, breath shallow. A few murmur quietly, a few don't move at all. You can't tell who's resting and who's already gone. You're too tired to care. It's peaceful in the most unnatural way. Like the space between thunder and the flash. Your muscles twitch in your sleep. You dream about walking, even now. Just one foot, then the other. In the dark, always in the dark. You dream of snow crunching under you, of voices too far away to reach. You hear someone call your name, maybe from weeks ago, maybe from tomorrow, and turn toward it in your dream. But your body doesn't follow. You stay rooted, heavy, still. You're not warm, but you no longer notice the cold. That's how it starts. The body pulls everything inward, hoards the last of its fire, and waits. You know this. You've seen it happen. You've stepped around enough men who rested for just a minute. You've seen the frost form on lips, on lashes, on wide open eyes. You should stay awake, you know that. But the knowledge and the will to act on it are no longer friends. They sit beside each other and refuse to speak. You don't want to die here, but more than that, you don't want to move again. You've fought gravity long enough. If this is where you fall, then let it be quiet. The stars keep watching, distant and disinterested. One shoots across the sky and vanishes. You blink, and it's gone. You wonder briefly if it was real. You wonder how many other men in this army saw it. Maybe none. Maybe a dozen. Maybe someone else wished on it. You didn't. Your past wishes. Somewhere nearby, a man starts coughing. Deep, wet, final. It doesn't stop for a long time. When it does, nothing replaces it. You wait to hear him shift or breathe or groan. He doesn't. You look in his direction but can't see anything in the dark. You roll onto your side and stop looking. A part of you still expects someone to come shake you awake. An officer, a friend, a ghost. Someone telling you it's time to move again. That the Romans are close. That there's a battle to fight and orders to follow. But no one does. The mountain is quiet. The fire you were too tired to build doesn't exist. The silence stretches. It doesn't threaten. It just settles. You think for a moment about what the historians will say, about the generals who will praise the crossing, about the scrolls and the speeches and the maps. None of them will mention this moment, this camp, this limp body curled against a tree, leaking heat into the dirt. You are not a chapter. You're not even a sentence. You're punctuation. A pause. A space between more important names. You don't fear death now. Not really. You fear continuation. The next march, the next field, the next battle where your half-healed frostbite has to carry a spear again. You fear standing when your body wants to sleep. You fear living through more of this. So maybe this is mercy, not a grand one. Not the kind with angels or meaning, just quiet, just stillness, just the final unwinding of muscles that have been clenched since you left home. The wind rises again, not louder, but closer. You feel it pull at your cloak, nudge your hair, pass across your chest like it's trying to see if you're still breathing. It is not hostile. It is not kind. It is just remembering you. And maybe, after all this, that's the closest thing to immortality you'll get. You are still. The world is still. The mountain has taken everything but your breath. And even that is thinning. That brings us to the end of tonight's march. Not a tale of glory, but of frostbite, starvation, and the kind of obscurity history likes to dress up in nicer words. If you're somehow still awake, thank you for trudging through the Alps with me. If you'd like early access to more quiet collapses and forgotten footnotes of human misery, plus ad-free audio of these episodes, the Patreon link is below. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment about the exact moment you would have laid down in the snow, and let the mountain win. And if you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps others stumble their way into these stories. Sleep well.